So, I want to talk to you about the Church of Antioch, Singapore, and being a base. So, we're picking up this theme of being a base again. Now, I want to ask you, if you hear this word being a base or a base, what's the first thing that goes through your mind? Is it generally a positive thought? Is it one of enthusiasm and say yes? Or is it kind of neutral or even negative? I'm not going to ask you to put up your hands, but I think it's not a word that we use every day, and I think there's mixed connotations that we have with that word. So I want to show you what I mean when I speak about a base and when we explore this topic this morning. So watch this video clip with me, see if you can picture yourself in this scene that will unfold here, and then we can tie everything that we speak about to this. So if you can put up the video, please, and make sure the sound's up. And I think the lights are okay. Yeah, thanks. Oh, you have to start again with sound. Yeah. From this week landing like that on the ship that's our church, and who's going to take off from this place like that this morning? I'm going to leave from here like that. Yeah. This is us. This is what it is meaning a base. It's an exciting, thrilling, incredible privilege of working together. Did you see the worship leader on the ship? You saw him there. This is what we're talking about. This is what we want to be as a team. I've got this amazing church in Antioch that's described to us in the book of Acts. We touched on it through some of the things that we've discussed before. A church that was really such a base, the very first one that was like that. So when Alexander the Great died, his empire was divided. The Ptolemies took Egypt and made Alexandria their capital, and the Seleucids took around this area around Syria. Syria is down here. And they made Antioch their capital. And then the Romans conquered all of this, so Rome started to rule this whole thing. And Syria became a very important province quite far away from Rome, and Antioch was the capital of that, the third biggest city of the Roman Empire, which is probably of the world at that time. So a very important city. And it was a multi-religious city, it was a multi-racial city. There were quite a few racial groups in there. There were some Greeks there were Orientals that came in. Oh, that's how the commentary describes it. And Syrians with a Baal kind of culture. The Grecians had the Zeus and Apollo worship. And there was a big Jewish community there as well. So you had all these different communities with completely different worldviews mixed in the same place. Now, I'm going to speak about Singapore, and you can already see how the incredible these parallels is. A busy city, a connected city, an administrative capital, a very important business hub, a lot of trade going through there. So this is a modern 3D visualization of what that city looked like. There was this little island with a palace, and there was this hippodrome where they had the chariot racing on the city. They had this 3-kilometer long marbled, colonnaded highway into the city, which was the biggest and the longest of that time, apparently even bigger than what was available in Rome at the time. They had this Colosseum kind of thing. So a lot of art, theater, entertainment, business. It was one of the most connected cities. It was 20 kilometers up the river from the port. There was a very important port there, and Singapore has a very important port. So, you know, with the ships able to navigate up this city and then trade and do their business there. So this city was struck by an earthquake about 37 before Christ, but was completely rebuilt. So there was a lot of favor on the city. Rome spent a lot of money on it, and under Gaius, this was completely restored and rebuilt very quickly. So that to keep peace and order, maybe one other important thing that you don't see on this picture so well, but you see it on some of the other pictures you can find, is to keep the order in this place. The Romans decided to build walls, so they tried to build walls to keep the Jews in one place, to keep the Greek people in one place, and to separate all these different communities and just make sure that they keep peace. Singapore has got a much better route, not saying no, we integrate, we live closely together. But that's Antioch as a city, a very important, very prominent city. I see from what Tim Keller writes, he says the Roman Empire understood cities and urbanization. They were years ahead of the rest of the world, and it's only now that we're starting to catch up and understand again what smart cities mean. You know, that's a topic that is talked about a lot. And it's only in the very recent past that we had urban centers, the way Rome had urban centers, and that they understood cities are efficient, cities are a great way to provide services to people in an efficient way. And Singapore has understood that better than many, many, many. So important. So then the story of Singapore. And as you can see, many parallels with Antioch: strategic location, political and economic influence in the region, multicultural, multi-religious. It's a communications hub. In fact, Singapore is ranked the second most globally connected city in the world. And I'll show you a lot more data about Singapore. So, that's. I want to now explain to you a little bit about Singapore and just the city of Singapore. And it's from my perspective, it's almost a testimony of how I've experienced the city. I'm quoting a lot of rankings and statistics. This is not a political speech. I'm presenting you with the facts. What I'm presenting to you, and if I had the time, I would have taken on each one of those the newspaper clippings from where I got this, because they are not Singapore newspaper propaganda. These are international rankings done by entities outside of Singapore that have given recognition to what this city and this place is. And I'm starting with Singapore, the legacy. So I'm starting with things that move slowly and that has been built over decades. So the things that you can really say is the legacy of leadership and the pioneers of Singapore. And then I'm going to come to the modern day legacy, the things that have been put in place by today's leadership, by today's people, by the people of today. The things that if you didn't get it right 5 years ago and maybe 8 years ago, we wouldn't have had this result. Okay, so we start with the things that came a long time ago. It's the safest city or nation in the world for raising children. That's globally. So think about the world. Think about all the countries that Singapore would compete against for this. It's the safest place to raise children in the whole world. It is the second best infrastructure globally. There's several surveys that rank this with different ratings. On all of them, Singapore comes out second or third, most of them second. So here we talk about airport, port, connectivity, every bit of infrastructure you can think of: water, roads, bridges, tunnels. So an amazing place to live, and when you see this, we should be grateful for either being born in this place or living in this incredible city. And this comes from, this kind of infrastructure investments is a large deal of what we do as a company. This is infrastructure that lasts 40, 50, 60 years. So you've got to be very visionary, and that was very visionary decisions that has led to this ranking. This is not something that someone can create in 4 or 5 years. This comes a long, long time, and it's a legacy that you really need for future generations. It's the 7th wealthiest country in the world. Now it depends when you measure and how you measure it. So I generally took conservative measures. There's some rankings that put Singapore as number 3 in purchasing power parity, GDP per capita. That basically means the amount of wealth created in the country divided by the number of people that live in the country. And it's compared with all countries globally. It's the country with over the last 50 years with by far more than 3 times faster average growth rate than any other country in the whole world. Singapore went from $500 per person, GDP per capita, in 1964 to 55,000, where we stand at the moment. An incredible, I would say, miraculous story. It is just absolutely miraculous. When you really look at it and you see the graph plotted against some of the most developed countries in the world, and you see Singapore outperform with such limited resources and with such a small space, it is a miracle. It is something that you cannot just say this was human-made. This is God's grace, that something like this could happen. It is 9th on the Human Development Index. So it's a broad index that the World Economic Forum runs to look at holistically how we take care of people. So it's not just money, not just affluence, but are people happy? Are they healthy? Are they taken care of? Is there art? Is there culture? It's a very broad, holistic assessment. Number 9 in the whole world. It's if you live in Singapore, or if you've been born here, you have the 3rd highest life expectancy of any country in the world. Wow. You will live 5 years longer than the average American, for example. So this is a gift from the people who founded Singapore and the kind of care that they provide, the infrastructure that we have here to you that adds to your life, which is absolutely incredible. That is just amazing when you think about that. So life expectancy in Singapore at the moment is 85, and it's growing by about a year every year. So how incredible is that?
Amazing.
Number 2, globally for home ownership. I know this is a controversial topic in Singapore, and there's debate about what is home ownership and the fact is that in a country that is it's the 3rd most densely populated country in the world, so severely space constrained. To have this number 2 globally for home ownership is an absolute miracle. It is incredible to, just when you think about the world and the amount of land available in other parts of the world, to see this statistic for Singapore. Incredible. So it's the 4th best school education system in the world. Again, it depends on the ranking. I went conservative. There's many rankings that put it 2, sometime back it was even number 1. If you look at the PISA scores for maths and science, Singapore always wins. They're always on top. So it depends a little bit which subjects you look at. But hands down, at least number 4 globally, recognized as the best schooling system. Singapore has got 2 universities in the top 25 globally. I think, it depends again on the ranking, but it's like number 11 and number 15 or 16. If you look in Asia, they're by far the 2 best universities. If you look at engineering and science, they are globally number 2, and I'm not sure where in the US is, but NTU is number 2. So again, this is institutions that are built over years. I have the incredible privilege to be an advisor on NUS's Department of Engineering and Computer Science. And if you see how that university is run, the way resources are made available, the speed at which they take decisions, the diligence with which teaching is managed, and the standards that they set, it is incredible. It is better than the best run business I've seen. It is the professionalism. If you get a glimpse of how this is run and what it takes to make this happen, it is amazing. It really is so well done. And I experienced that firsthand. I've seen many companies and many businesses, and it is amazing, really incredible. It's got the most reliable electricity grid in the world. So in Singapore, and I have to say, we supply most equipment. It's good. But it's an incredible enabler of stability and of business able to thrive. I mean, on average, a Singaporean consumer loses only 12 seconds of power supply a year. That is twice as good as the next best country, and it is orders of magnitude better than countries like the US or anywhere else. So an incredible advantage to Singapore to have this. And this is infrastructure that's built over many years. Singapore today, so some of the more recent things that has been put in place and that has been done. It is number one, ease of doing business. So you can create red tape very quickly. So Singapore consistently, I think for the last 6 or 7 years, rated number one for ease of doing business. That attracts investors, that attracts people to come and build factories here and to invest. It was just announced that Dyson will build an electric vehicle car manufacturing plant in Singapore. Who would have thought anybody is going to build cars in Singapore again? But it's latest technology, highly automated plant. They're doing this, and you'll see the statistic come up in a minute, because Singapore was so clever in negotiating trade agreements with countries that make Singapore, because of stability, automation, workforce, and very cleverly designed trade agreements that were put in place at the right time before it became the flavor of the month for everyone else, that this is the best place actually to export into China. Of many other, so there's big, strong manufacturing centers even in Southeast Asia, but they don't have the trade agreement. Very cleverly done. It's the 6th least corrupt. I think we will all work to make sure this goes to number one. But yeah, globally, it's the number one fastest internet speed in the world. This is critically important, not just for our convenience so that you can watch your movies faster, but that's why data centers are coming. And this is one of the global data center hubs, far exceeding any prediction that were made about the number of data centers in Singapore. I can't tell you the details because every one of us come with a non-disclosure agreement. You won't see it in the papers, but about 350 megawatt of power is consumed by data centers today. Another 600 megawatt will be connected to the grid before the end of Q1 next year. And it's just not stopping. And Singapore has understood smart cities. They know how to do it in a condensed scale, multi-story, how to insulate so that it's efficient even though it's the tropics. The electricity grid is absolutely critical for this. This is investment that cannot move quickly. These are billions of dollars investment that secures income for the future generations in Singapore. And the internet speed comes because of very, very smart, clever investments in optic fiber C cables. Singapore is one. If you look at a map of fiber optic cables in the world, and you see the connections that come into Singapore and what a node it is, it's very, very intentionally, very cleverly done. And this is, again, many years back, before anybody thought about, now everybody's scrambling for bandwidth. If you go on the SRE, you see those satellite farms, massive dishes, satellite connectivity. So it's not only the fastest fiber speed in the world, also the fastest 4G speed in the world. And I can probably fold that out. But it is incredible. It's just amazing. It's the 3rd most competitive economy. So if you look at the total, now, if you think again, Singapore is, I think it's the 4th most expensive city in the world. To still come out as the 3rd most competitive economy in the world, an incredible feat. So that's where you want to be. You don't want to be the cheapest and uncompetitive. You want to be, where you pay the real price for things, the real price for electricity, the real price for housing, the real price for transport, which is not happening anywhere else, and still be 3rd most competitive. An incredible accomplishment. It's the 3rd most innovative country in the world. I hear so many people slate Singapore for not being innovative. And sure, there's a lot of brains that get brought to participate and to partner in a very clever way. But Singapore is ranked, and again, this is not Singaporean press reporting. This is from an American ranking, which very rarely acknowledges that there's anything outside the US that has ranked Singapore 3rd most innovative. They look at patents registered, they look at. Did you know that the thumb drive, that USB stick that I brought my presentation on, the patent was first registered in Singapore. They sold USB sticks in Singapore before they sold them in the US. just one of those innovations that I didn't know. When I looked, I found that. Yeah. It's rated number 1 in technological readiness, so that's the way in which the country has prepared its society and its institutions and its companies, its businesses to be adopting technology and to drive productivity and efficiency through technology. Number 1. It's the 3rd most important research hub for artificial intelligence research, so an incredible amount of work that is done here fairly quietly. So if you think again of the centers around the world where this is driven, to amazing achievement by Singapore. It's the 2nd most dense country for industrial robots, so the number of robots per factory, number of factory workers, it's about 480 per 10,000 workers. So driving productivity, and if you don't drive productivity in Singapore, it cannot compete. So it's so connected with being competitive. And this is typically work that is unsafe. It is typically work that you cannot get the quality if humans did the work. And that's exactly why they can come and build a car manufacturing plant here that create high quality jobs in the country, the kind of jobs that you want to have Singaporeans in the future, and drives exports and GDP. It's good for trade balances. It's number 1 greenest city, so densely populated and still, but green in trees. Okay, it's not doing that well on the environmental arrangements, but green in terms of the number of trees. And what a blessing to have all these parks around and beautiful spaces around Singapore. Cleverly done, and great that that's guarded and protected in Singapore. It is also the country with the fastest walking speed on average. So, I don't know if we're proud of that one. And it's number 1 for, there's a ranking that says which country is best set up for trade. And Singapore is number 1 at the moment as the best set up for trade. So as I said, very, very cleverly done trade agreements. Singapore did a trade agreement with China on very favorable terms. Understanding how important that market's going to be years before many others have tried to set it up. And if you try to do that today, it would be much more difficult, and it would come on completely different terms. A few things just from my own experience is that with the incredible privilege to participate in this Committee for the Future Economy, and now also some of the committees that are executing the plans that were made there. An incredibly forward-looking country and a forward-looking people, anticipating what's coming, placing some bets, many of them good, some of them you have to just place bets, and some of them don't work, but at least looking at the future and not just trying to cope with the present. Amazing vision for urban mobility. I tell you this, a lot of people would say cars are so expensive in Singapore and so on, but just think for a second that this 70, 80 kilogram human being, that we've built a thing that weighs 1.5 tons to move us around, and it takes up more space sleeping than human beings take up sleeping in a country. That's not a good plan. And Singapore has said, no, this is not the way. We build trains, we invest in MRTs, we go car light. And now the whole world is changing to that, and understanding that even with electric cars, okay, it makes things a little bit better. But you've got to increase the use of these things because it's out of balance. And Singapore has seen this 15, 20 years ago. And visionary, really smart, and it clearly has paid. Government planning engagement process. I meet a lot of people in government. Nothing comes close to Singapore in the openness to listen to inputs, to learn from other countries, to take that on board, to use the best to craft the future, to check their plans whether it makes sense or not, to check their assumptions. And as I say, I've experienced this machinery personally. I really see the competence of the government, ARTC, A-STAR, all these institutions that do science and research and so on, the best of the best. The meritocracy approach works. They are really, really smart people. Just to give you one example, we opened this Customer Innovation Center and invited some of these people. And the ideas I got from just walking through the center with some of the staff that run these government agencies it's door-opening, business-enabling ideas. Just walking through, and the guy said, well, what about this? Did you think about this? Why not do it like that? Good business mind, not bureaucrats, not typical government officials, people that understand how things work. And I've got 5, 6 ideas that I can put in place just walking through with three different individuals from Singapore government agencies. Amazing. All the brains in the MB couldn't think of those things. They came with it, just like that. So, and as I said, strategic free trade agreements. So that's just something about Singapore. I think we need to honor the city and this country. I do. I thank God every day for learning from Singapore and being able to live here, being able to be safe here. So Antioch was a hub, Singapore is the hub of no, it is an amazingly connected city. It's an incredible kingdom opportunity for us to learn from what happens here, to go and bless others with that, and for a place in which the gospel and the kingdom can thrive and enables it. And I want to go and look at Antioch and how that worked and see how we can draw parallels to Singapore. So the church in Antioch. Now, this amazing little church there. This is Turkey today, that's Syria, Israel down here, and having an incredible impact around the world. We are a result of some of the missions that came out of that little church. So what I want to do is, don't you want to just immerse yourself in that day and age? Just remember what happened there. Just close your eyes. I'm going to read this passage from the Message, just to give you the context. So think about what the refugees scattered. I mean, this what I'm going to read happens just after Stephen was killed. So this was actually Saul persecuting the church, and as a result of that, deacons got appointed. One of them was Stephen, a spirit-filled man, proclaimed the word of God, and he got stoned to death. And after his death, there's this persecution, and that persecution led to Christians traveling all over the region, and some of them reached Antioch. And that's how this church starts. And that's where we're going to pick up the story. So just without reading yourself, so just listen to the story and just imagine yourself in that situation, having to flee the place where you live. Think about the refugee pictures that you see on the TV today, and the tough situation, and listen to how they behave and what happens here. And it says, those who had been scattered by the persecution triggered by Stephen's death traveled as far as Phoenicia, which is Lebanon, Cyprus, the island, and Antioch. But they were still only speaking and dealing with their fellow Jews. And then some of the men from Cyprus and Cyrene who came to Antioch started talking to the Greeks, giving them the message of Master Jesus. God was pleased with that and with what they were doing and put his stamp of approval on it. And quite a number of the Greeks believed and turned to the Master. When the church in Jerusalem got wind of this, they sent Barnabas to Antioch to check what is going on. As soon as he arrived, he saw that God was behind it and in it all. He threw himself in with them and got behind them, urging them to stay with this the rest of their lives. He was a good man that way. Enthusiastic and confident in the Holy Spirit's ways. The community grew large and strong in Jesus. Then Barnabas went to Tarsus to look for Saul. He found him and brought him back to Antioch. And were there for a whole year, meeting with the church and teaching a lot of people. It was in Antioch that the disciples were for the first time called Christians. And it was about at the same time that some prophets came to Antioch from Jerusalem, and one of them, named Abagus, stood up one day, prompted by the Spirit, warned of a severe famine that was about to devastate the country. And that famine actually came during the rule of Claudius. So the disciples decided that each of them would send whatever they could to their fellow Christians in Judea to help them out. And they sent Barnabas and Saul to deliver the collection to the leaders in Jerusalem. So there you get this story, scattering of Christians and traveling far and wide. Some came to Antioch, started to cross these cultural divides and cultural barriers, and the church starts. I'm just going to go through this piece by piece. I've got these verses from the ESV. So I just pick it up again. Now those who were scattered because of the persecution that arose over Stephen traveled as far as Phoenicia, Cyprus, and Antioch, speaking the word to none except the Jews. But then there were some of them, men of Cyprus and Cyrene, who on coming to Antioch spoke to the Hellenists also, preaching the Lord Jesus. So amazing that this church starts out of such adversity? And we also have tough times. We also have adversity. And I find it amazing that these people were proclaiming Jesus as far as they went. Here they go under hardship, not cursing Jesus, the reason they got, but proclaiming Jesus, preaching Jesus. So just a question to us is we will face adversity, or we will face external circumstances that move us around, that make us take different paths, that put us in contact with different kinds of people that we maybe didn't plan. And the thing is, what are you going to do? What are you going to speak about? Are you going to be complaining? Or are you going to be honoring Jesus and speaking about Jesus? Wonderful that they did that. And then amazing that they crossed cultural divides. By this time, they wouldn't have heard about Peter's vision, probably. I don't think these guys knew about the vision Peter got earlier in Acts, about that it is for everyone, and what happens that could happen at Cornelius' house. Maybe they did, but they were crossing cultural divides. And this whole church is built up multiculturally. Now, I just want to share with you just some data points again, just from my own experience and what I've seen. Every study that I've seen that has been done about the performance of business when it's culturally diverse and gender diverse shows that business performs better when it is diverse than when it's not, when it's just one single culture. This, friends, is evidence that God's plan is the right. I do things God's way anyway, but we have this incredible body of evidence. And I quote to you from McKinsey, which is one of the biggest and most renowned consulting companies in the world. They say companies in the top quartile for racial and ethnic diversity are 35% more likely to have financial returns above their respective national industry norms. How's that? 35% better chance for financial success in a company if it's more diverse. This is God's way. This is God's plan. This is God's kingdom. And this is no different in the church. And that's why we are also a church that embrace diversity and in the congregation and in the leadership of the church. I can quote you a lot more stats, but I don't think we have time for that. I give you one more. In the UK, greater gender diversity on the senior executive team of a company corresponded to the highest performance uplift in our data set. For every 10% increase in gender diversity, profit rose by 3.5%. Just think of the things you have to do to increase profit by 3.5%. And here it is, just 10% more gender diversity in executive management. That's why my management team is 50-50. We are equal. So, and that brings the right kind of discussions, it brings the right kind of dynamics. God's way, His plan. And the incredible thing is, that stands out from this whole church is how much they made of Jesus. Everywhere you see, they're proclaiming the Lord Jesus. They loved Jesus so much. They made so much of Him. They understood the power that there is in the name of Jesus. And if you don't have that, there's nothing you can share. They had that. So no matter how much that adversity was, no matter that they came in an unfamiliar place, meeting unfamiliar people, they had Jesus to share. They knew Him intimately, and they held on to Him. And that's what they proclaimed. And I think this is a story. The story of Antioch is a story of the life-changing power of the gospel, the good news of Jesus. It says there that the next verse, and the hand of the Lord was with them, and had a great number who believed that turned to the Lord. And that's the life-changing power of the gospel, friends. This is amazing. And you'll see in this passage this preaching and teaching. So preaching was what everybody did. It says that they all preached the gospel of Jesus. So everybody had the ability to explain about their relationship with Jesus, every single one. And that's, again, for us, every one of us, priesthood of all believers, should have this ability to explain with enthusiasm and passion, irrespective of the circumstances you find yourself in, the wonderful good news of Jesus. And that is what triggered this incredible growth. This is what gave the life to this church, that so many people turned to Jesus and wanted to meet Him. Not great leadership. In fact, there's no mention of leadership in this whole church until the message of this amazing work that was happening reached Jerusalem. Then they sent out someone to come and check this out. This is not from here. This is the priesthood of all believers in action. People madly in love with Jesus, speaking to other people about it.
Yeah.
I saw such a beautiful example of that on Friday night at Little India. I was walking with Rachel on the way to the meeting. We were a little bit early, so we just walked through the little alleyways there. And we got past one little tailor shop, and the guy was hassling me, come in, come buy a suit, how much you want to pay for a suit? And I was at first a little bit, it's just noise everywhere and almost not past. And I kind of turned and started the conversation with him. And Waichong was already past. He came around, came back. And I said, I'm not here to buy a suit tonight. Thank you very much. But so he says, what are you here to do? So by this time, Waichong reaches and he says, we're Christians. We're praying for people. So the guy says, his face changed in front of me. He had a cigarette in his hand. He put the cigarette out, stuck it in his water bottle, closed the water bottle, threw it away, and he said, will you pray for me? Then we go to Little India, thinking, where are we? How are we going to pray for someone? This is our heart's desire. Here the guy asks, people everywhere. We're in the middle of, there's a throng of people around us. Will you pray for me? He bows his head in front of Rachel. And then he prays for him. Just there. Put his arms around him, pray for him right there. And God would bless him, that he would know God, and that God would watch over him, and communicate with him. That's it. A simple word. We are here as Christians. Just saying that proudly, and there you go. Door opens supernaturally.
Yeah.
Pray for them.
Yeah.
So the life-changing power of the gospel, friends, we have to start there, because without that there's no other start. And then the report of this came to the ears of the church in Jerusalem. So when we live like that, it shows, it's visible. And it went to Jerusalem. So you can imagine Jerusalem hearing about this. Gee, we didn't plant the church there. We didn't send anyone. What's going on? We better send someone to go and check. So they found Barnabas. Said, Barnabas, go. You go and have a look and see what's going on there. So a good report. I just want to say, what's the report that rings out from our church? Every church has a report that goes out. People say some things about our church, and this is my heart's desire, that this would be the report that goes out from our church, is that we're in love with Jesus and we're proclaiming Him. And that's changing lives everywhere in a way that's so visible and so clear, across cultural and social boundaries. And also, who would we send if we hear a report like that? Are we open to receive reports like that? Because we're connected with a church in Sri Lanka, in Indonesia, in many places. And then we got someone to send. But then that's the wonderful thing that, let me just make sure I don't lose my place. Yeah. When Barnabas got there, he says there, when he came and saw the grace of God. Now, isn't that a peculiar thing to notice? Here's the guy, the inspector from Jerusalem, coming to this church. He arrives there, and he doesn't pull out his checklist and say, the gospel is pure. They're not teaching about circumcision like the Galatians did a little bit later. They're meeting in the right way, and they're not abusing people, and they're not swindling money. Tick, 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 tick. He comes there and he sees, I see the grace of God. Yeah. Amazing observation. They've ticked all the boxes of what we compartmentalize to be church and how things should be. And what he saw was the effect that this preaching of the gospel had on people. Firstly, he saw, just imagine, he saw people that were persecuted, people that were fled because they feared their lives, arriving in a city, crossing cultural boundaries, and preaching the gospel. So that's the first thing he saw, is they didn't sit there and were miserable, or maybe they were, but that didn't stop them from preaching. So firstly, he saw that. And the second thing is he saw this amazing thing that they crossed cultural boundaries in a city which had walls between these communities. And then what I believe most of all he saw is he saw changed lives. He saw people transformed. He saw, remember I told you about the diverse cultures and the different worldviews these people held. He saw people who I mean, I don't know about you, but when at work or something, when you speak to people and you listen to how strongly they hold their views about why there's no God, or why they're Buddhist, or why they're this, or why they're that, their religious views or whatever. People hold, it's heavily protected ground, worldviews. And I think he stood amazed when he saw ordinary people. Let me say, when God works through ordinary people and you see this incredible transformation happening against all the odds. And I think that's why he says, I saw the grace of God, and he was glad. He was happy to see it. You see Barnabas' heart, and that he understood the kingdom. He understood what really mattered, is that it's not running a polished church with perfectly organized worship and meetings, but that life of the kingdom that transforms and changes lives. And this is the dream for us too. Wherever we go, through all the wonderful connectivity that we have in this city, the ability to preach Jesus and mention him and say that we are Christian. It says in one of the things I read that the self-absorbed pagans of Antioch were turning to the Lord, and they were being reshaped by God's grace. How amazing is that? That happens. And then what I will point out at this point in time, it comes later, the fact that they were named Christians the first time. But the incredible thing I think that Barnabas also saw is he saw the public notice this. The general public saw something incredible happen here, this incredible change happening inside their own city. And they had a problem because of this compartmentalization, they could categorize people easily. They knew these are the Jews, those are the Hellenists, those are the Syrians that worship Baal. And suddenly they couldn't categorize these people. What do you call these guys that have now got it totally changed? There's clearly a group of people that live differently. They don't fit anywhere else. They need a new name. So it was the pagans, the citizens of this city, the general public had to find a new name for this group, which was now clearly recognized. And they called them Christians. Why? Because of Jesus Christ, because of the one they follow. So amazing how visible it is when this transforming work of Christ is at work inside of us. So what did Barnabas do when he saw this transformation? He didn't study it. He didn't write it up as a case study. He didn't start a new program or institutionalize it. He joined them and he exhorted them and he encouraged them. His name means encourager. Faithful to Jesus and steadfast in love. He exhorted them to remain faithful to the Lord with steadfast purpose. I love that. Keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, nowhere else. Don't look at any other human being or any other form of leadership. To keep your eyes fixed on Jesus and keep proclaiming him. And then steadfast in purpose. It's the same as Paul said, I stretch out to the goal that's in front of me. They understood their purpose, to glorify God, to bring his kingdom to be in the place where they are, irrespective of the circumstances they found themselves in. Very clear about their purpose. And that's how we should be, not unclear at all, but clear about our purpose. And then this wonderful description of Barnabas, and I think we can do a whole sermon about this man and the character that he was. So he was faithful, man of integrity, a trusted man. But it's wonderful to see what made him good in God's eyes, because he was full of the Holy Spirit and full of faith. And I think that's for us today, is having we got faith to let God's grace happen through our lives. That we could also see God's grace at work in this society, in our church. And we got faith for that today. Because then we'll be like Barnabas, a man of faith and a man filled with the Holy Spirit. That brings the power, that brings the supernatural change, supernatural effect. So, next, Barnabas went to Tarsus to look for Saul. When I first saw that, I thought this man needed help. He was now running the church, he was getting busy, there was a lot to do, and he needed help. And I see quite a few of the commentaries have that same kind of tone to it. But I'm now convinced that's not what happened. Barnabas remembered Saul because he was the guy that said to the guys in Jerusalem, Saul is truly converted. He really changed, and you should let him in, and we should accept him and trust him. And Barnabas knew that Paul had not fully understood how the grace of God works, and had to go through this process to understand more. And one of the commentaries says that that's why Barnabas went for Saul, not because he needed help. The church was getting on with it. In fact, he could trust them and leave them and go. So he went looking for Saul to come and show him what it looks like when God's grace is at work, when people are madly in love with Jesus and they are testifying. And Paul came there for 1 year. He spent with this church, teaching them, and no doubt understanding and observing and seeing this incredible power, life-changing, transforming power of God at work in a city and in a society. And and very shortly after that, he started writing the book of Galatians in that church, which we studied for quite a few weeks here. I read something from D.A. Carson that points out another dimension of the leadership of the church in Antioch. He says this church leadership in Antioch must have been extraordinarily diverse. Barnabas was a Levite of the Jewish priestly heritage, but he was from the Greek society of the island of Cyprus. And then there was Simon, a Jewish name called Niger, an expression that pretty much means Simon the Black, an African guy. So he would have been a son of African proselytes to Judaism and a convert himself. And we don't know much about Lucius, another guy from Cyrene, but apparently he, like Barnabas, was from the Mediterranean island. And from his name, it shows that he belongs to a Hellenistic worldview. And then there was a guy called Manaen, who had enough connections with minor nobility that he grew up with Herod the Tetrarch. So a guy of nobility. And then we have Saul, this guy from a Roman citizen. So a very, very diverse group of leaders there in that church.
Yeah.
And then you see there, this is where the disciples were first called Christians. So the public, the society recognizing that they belong to Christ and that they are totally different from any other group there. And then you find this description in verse 27, in these days prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch, so this connectedness was there, someone called Abagus gave this prophetic word. You see how these people respond in generosity. So wonderful characteristics of this church: open to the Holy Spirit, obedient, immediately, generous hearts, action-oriented. Get on with it. Let's do it. Holy Spirit spoke. No second. We do it. Then we pick this up in Acts 13, verse 1 to 3. Now they were in the church at Antioch, prophets and teachers. Now that's interesting. 2 chapters later, there's prophets and teachers in the church. They're not coming from Jerusalem anymore, right? So that shows the effect of the teaching and how people have embraced that 1 year that Barnabas and Saul has spent there teaching them. They've moved on in their faith. They've grown up in the gifts of the Holy Spirit. So there you go, prophets and teachers. Barnabas, Simeon, all these names that I just quoted you. While they were worshiping the Lord and fasting, the Holy Spirit said, set apart for me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I've called them. So this wonderful picture of a worshiping church. And I just want to say, friends, there's so much more for us in worship. I loved the worship this morning. I loved the testimonies from going to that worship event on Friday evening, kneeling under worship and then getting touched. Batwa and as well, Chantal. And I've personally experienced that. I've been healed so many times under worship, just worshiping God, and then for a second remembering that there was something not right with me and then getting set right. This morning I had a blocked sinus and the Bible said pray. I put my hand there. It's completely clear. Completely clear. Under worship. So worship, incredibly powerful. But friends, we should never mistake that worship is initiated by the group of guys that stand up front here and that they're the ones who have to make worship happen. We come in here worshiping, like this church did. And worship comes from us. It's actually quite unnatural, I think, to sing pre-prepared songs all the time and only. There should be songs of worship coming from us, new songs, born in the moment from the Holy Spirit. That's a more natural way of worshiping. Remembering these testimonies like we had them this morning and bringing them as offerings to God, acknowledging what He's done. So may there be much more free worship in this place. And prayers offered, scriptures that come to mind, words of knowledge and wisdom under worship, and just beautiful poems and pictures of ascribing glory and worth to God. Not just what we want, but just like this church, it was so clear how they love Jesus and how they were all about Him. And they in this worship, I have this picture of every person there was really worshiping. They didn't have to wait for a band to show up and get the song right. You know, so that's I think something I desire for us is that we have this fullness of free worship in this place. Then they were clearly missionary because they set apart from Barnabas and Saul. So this is the two main leaders of the church at that point in time, or I guess the two, at least from what we can see, two very prominent guys. So that they took their best to send. They were a sending church. They were a giving church. They understood that there's more than just being a church on their own. And they didn't build towards themselves, but they understood that what they experienced, what they saw in front of them, their own eyes happened. That has to happen in the whole world. So then after fasting and praying, they laid their hands on them and sent them off. And so, being sent out by the Holy Spirit, they went down to Seleucia, and from there they sent disciples. And when they arrived at Salamis, they proclaimed the word of God in the synagogues of the Jews, and they had John to assist them. So a beautiful picture of them going out on these amazing missionary journeys that go out from the church of Antioch. So that's a little bit my testimony. Is just, I came here for work. I came here because of an external reason. I knew that I'm coming here for kingdom purposes as well. But whether I knew it or not, it was God at work, and that's why I came here. And that's just my testimony. And it's just the absolute story of my life. I can give you so many examples of problems I found in work or opportunities I find in my work situation where I've got teaching here in church, a word that I heard under worship, something that was preached by Johan or someone else that preached here, that was exactly what I needed for that situation. And that mixed and blended with everything I experienced in Singapore, which is a base and such an incredibly vibrant city, with leading in so many ways. And so I get, like, if you talk about integrity, and I see how that's worked out, what a policy looks like that considers integrity in work, So I know that integrity is important from God's word, and that's the way we work. I've seen it put in place in Singapore. I get ideas from that. Even if it's not perfect, I can bring it, I can align it with what I know from God's word, and then what the Holy Spirit says in the moment, and I can then say a sentence or start a whole change program where I visit our company in Vietnam, for example, and I have to speak to the management team about integrity and our performance there. So, and in everything, in this innovation center that we built in Singapore, I promise you, I had no idea of the concept of putting that together. But what I understand from kingdom culture is work together, integrate, not silos, not everybody separate. And our problem is all the different solutions we have, let's say digital solutions, are all in separate different departments, and it's very difficult to bring this together. Last week I had the incredible privilege, and some of you know, to actually chair a meeting with Dr. Mahathir, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, and how God opens those doors and how He makes things flow together because of a prophetic word I've had many years, maybe 10, 15 years ago, of meeting kings and princes and knowing that I'm walking in as the representative of God, not the representative of my company. And, well, of course, that's the way in which it happens, and that gives me a legitimacy to speak in a worldly way. But I'm in that room as a representative of the Most High God. And He opens those doors for us. And then again, this amazing blending together of kingdom, my love for Jesus, the kingdom culture, everything I get from our church here, which is a base which resources us, so that when we go to wherever we go, we can put the kingdom in practice. We can change this world. We can have a massive impact. And one prayer prayed in that heart of where Villiers' future is determined, and the encouragement we could give, and the advice we could give, and the views we could exchange there, it is life-changing. It is just God's kingdom. And friends, this is not me. I'm an everyday, ordinary person. There's no reason about me to have been in that room and stand there. But God. But God's way. Incredible. And so this is, I believe, what it is like to be this aircraft carrier, launching missions, people preparing the planes, fueling, some piloting, some flying, and we are all using Singapore's incredible infrastructure to connect with people here, to travel out into the world with opportunity every day, all the time, to preach the gospel, to speak about Jesus, to tell people I'm Christian, I'm proud of it, and they will come asking for prayer. They will come asking, please advise me, please help me.
Yeah.
And this is priesthood of all believers. That was the characteristic of this church. There's everybody in. They didn't sit and wait for some leader to initiate some action. This was what they did. This is how they did it. This is God's plan for us and His dream for us. So let's be like Antioch. Let's embrace adversity. Never stop proclaiming Jesus. Never stopping to testify about Him, but to amplify it through whatever has happened. Just like you did in your testimony a while ago. Felt something that happened, could have been worse. Thank you, Jesus. And we go forward. Truly using the opportunities presented by the strategic city in which we live for the kingdom's cause, touching every part of society, business, culture, art, wherever we go. Everything gets better when we bring kingdom culture to that, when we bring the love of Jesus. Crossing these cultural boundaries, and make no mistake, even though in Singapore we live quite close together, there are still massive boundaries between cultures and hierarchies in society. And we have to cross those. We should be blind to them. And just like these Christians of Antioch, as a base church, be the ones who break down these barriers actively every day, and across Southeast Asia and across the whole world. So this is us, and this is the incredible effect that God will have through the whole world from what we do here and from the way we live our lives. And this is not a heavy, this is a great joy. This is just an incredible blessing to live in this city, to be exposed with all the good things that is happening here, to keep helping and making even better the things that are not perfect yet, and taking this with our kingdom culture and our love of Jesus to wherever we go, and every person we encounter, and every little bit makes a change. And for some of you, it will be very visible, and you'll see it, and for some, it will be generations after where people will talk about something that happened that was a little bit like the person that flew from Jerusalem, fearing their life, and just speaking to a Greek guy somewhere in the store, or that wonderful picture in the Bible of the guy praying his traditional prayer, and then the sinner came in there, knowing Jesus, said, Jesus, have mercy on me. And a man hearing that simple prayer, and that changes his whole life. Opens up a whole new perspective on God. So that's, I think, where I will end. And I think, I just want to say, if you got faith this morning that someone will come and see the grace of God at work in your life, maybe that's a place to start. It's just to have the faith, to truly believe that the grace of God could be made visible in your life and through the effect of your life on others as part of this church community. And for some of you, I believe this is a morning to stand up and say, I am on that aircraft carrier. I am launching out of this place at full throttle. The whole world will hear me roar because I'm part of a place. I'm part of a group of people that has an incredible impact because of the God that we serve. And we will never think about that and make less of it than what it should be and what it is. Because this is God's kingdom, and this is who we are. So, let's respond to Jesus. Don't you stand with me and we pray. So Lord Jesus, we are these fighters that launch from this amazing aircraft carrier of your church, empowered by you, Lord, designed by you, made by you. And thank you, God, that we can be part of this. And we go out, Lord, not to throw bombs, to take lives, but Lord, the bombs of truth and grace that we are going to throw is going to bring from death to life.
Yeah.
It's going to resurrect what's dead. It's going to bring kingdom life.
Yeah.
There are salvations coming this week because of your testimony strength. There's salvations coming this week. People will change and will transform. Will be transformed because of your testimony, because of your smile, because of your embrace, because of the kind deeds that you do, saying that you are Christian. And Lord, we are not going to bomb cities and flatten them like we do when there's war. But we are going to wage war in a different way. We are going to build cities. We are going to transform cities, Lord, with your kingdom ways, with good ideas, with sparks of innovation and imagination, with art, with culture, with just words of encouragement, Lord. Putting fuel where fuel is needed into Christian circles, God. So help us to be those people, your people, Antioch people, Singapore people, that go and has this incredible effect of changing the world because we love you and because we prepare to stand for you. We love you, Jesus. Amen.